Is the Umidigi Power 5 a good phone to buy in 2022? Well, in this video, we're gonna find out. What's going on, guys? Kalipis Tech here, coming back at you with another video. In this video, we're gonna be taking a look at the Umidigi Power 5 and going over whether or not it's still a good phone to buy in 2022. So let's get into it. Now, this phone has a 6.53-inch LCD display with a resolution of 720p, a PPI of 160, and an aspect ratio of 20:9. So in pretty much every way, this is a really standard kind of display for an entry-level phone. Pretty much every average phone in this price range is going to have the same kind of display. Now, that's not really a bad thing because 6.53 inches is definitely not small. So when you're streaming videos, viewing photos, playing games, even reading, everything is going to show up decently large on this display. But at the same time, it's not going to be so large that it's uncomfortable to hold or carry in your pocket. The phone has a decently slim design as well, which really adds to this. Now, we got a water drop notch up here for the front-facing camera, and this camera is 8 megapixels. For storage, this phone has 128 gigabytes of internal storage with microSD card expansion, so that's a huge strong point for this phone. Not very many entry-level phones have that much storage, and sometimes even phones that are much more expensive than this one still don't have that much storage. I mean, before the iPhone 13 even, the iPhone 12 actually started out at only 64 gigabytes, which is half this phone's storage. So that really goes to show that not every phone is going to have this much storage regardless of the price. So if you're a power user, if you have lots of apps, that sort of thing, you're definitely going to benefit from this. Now, there's no wireless charging with this phone, no surprise there, but we do have a fingerprint scanner right here on the power key, and there's also face unlock, so it's nice that we get both options here. Let's go ahead and give that fingerprint scanner a try and see how well it works. There we go, one more time. And there we go. So as you can see, the fingerprint scanner was real fast and responsive, no issues there at all. But I will say the power key does feel a little bit flimsy, which I'm not a huge fan of. But other than that, there are no real issues in its functionality. Now, for the camera setup here, we got a triple camera with a 16 megapixel main camera, an 8 megapixel ultra wide camera, and a 5 megapixel macro camera. We also got a thermometer here. Now, this photo was taken with the main camera of the phone, and as you can see, it's a pretty good quality photo. There are definitely phones that take better photos than this, but if you want to take the occasional nice photo for social media or something like that, I'd say this phone will get the job done. Now, in case you're wondering, this phone does have portrait mode. This photo was actually taken with portrait mode, but you probably will notice the background's not blurred out or anything like that. This phone doesn't have a depth sensing camera, so portrait mode is pretty much useless. So keep that in mind. If you want a phone that's going to take real nice portrait photos, this is not going to be it. But other than that, this phone does take pretty decent photos overall. Internally, this phone is getting 4 gigabytes of RAM with the MediaTek Helio G25 processor. I ran a Geekbench 5 benchmark test on the phone, and it came back with a single core score of 145 and a multi-core score of 857. So this is really not bad. For an entry-level phone, it's going to be able to do pretty much anything you need it to do. If you're browsing the web, going on social media, maybe playing a few lower-end mobile games, then streaming videos, sending text messages, making calls, all that sort of stuff, it's going to be perfectly fine. Just know it's not going to be nearly as fast as a mid-range phone, like for example the Samsung Galaxy A52 or one of those 5G phones. But other than that, if you just need a phone for basic activities that's nothing fancy, this is definitely far from the worst, and I think it will get the job done for most people in that price range. For battery, this phone has a 6,150 milliamp hour battery that supports 10 watt fast charging. So these are some real impressive battery specs. You're gonna get a ton of life throughout the day, probably without having to charge it unless you're using the phone really heavily. And even when your phone is dying, you can charge it up a lot faster than some entry-level phones that don't support fast charging. So that makes things a lot more convenient. In addition to this, over time, as the battery starts to degrade, you're not going to notice it nearly as quickly as you would with a smaller battery. So as a result, if you like to keep one phone for a long time without having to replace it, this phone is probably going to be a good option for that. So now that we've gone over some of the specs and features, let's take a closer look at the device itself. On the left-hand side here, we got the slot for the SIM card and the microSD card. This is basically a button that gives you 3 more shortcuts for the phone, and that can really come in handy. In case you're wondering exactly how to use it, I do have a tips and tricks video on the channel where I go over this more in depth. But essentially, if you really like shortcuts, the Smart Key is going to make this phone a good option for you. Now on the bottom here, we got the microphone, a USB-C port, and the speaker. On the right hand side, of course, we got the power key that's also the fingerprint scanner, volume keys. Up top, we got a 3.5mm headphone jack. On the back, we got our triple camera setup, our flash, and of course, the thermometer. There's a Umidigi logo right here, slogan right here, and overall, I really like the material this back is made of. It looks really nice and doesn't really pick up fingerprints. The phone has a decently slim design that makes it comfortable to hold. And overall, while not having the best quality in the buttons, it does feel pretty solid and sturdy. So in conclusion, is the Umidigi Power 5 worth buying in 2022? Despite a few shortcomings, I would say it's still a good phone in this day and age. The display is nothing special, but it does have a lot of storage, especially for an entry-level phone, and this is going to be really useful if you're a power user. It has a fingerprint scanner on the power key, and again, the power key is a little flimsy, but in terms of functionality, I've had no issues, and I've had this phone for a little while now, so I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. The camera setup is okay. I wish it had a depth sensing camera. That would have been real nice to take actual portrait photos, but it does take good enough normal photos from the main camera to sort of make up for it, and it has an ultra-wide camera too. In addition to that, it has a decently powerful processor for what it is. I mean, you're not going to be able to do anything really special on this phone, but if you're just going to be browsing the web, going on social media, that sort of thing, and if you're planning on being on your phone a decent amount, it should hold up just fine. I really like the Smart Key too. I'm a big fan of shortcuts and stuff like that, so that Smart Key is great. And of course, this phone has a super large battery with fast charging, so if battery life is one of your main concerns, this is going to be one of the better options for you. So at the end of the day, this is very much an entry-level phone, and sure, it's not perfect in any way, but I still think it provides a good amount of value in 2022. But I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I hope you found this information useful as well. If you did, don't forget to leave a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel, and as always, I will see you in the next video.